I really don't want a garage one. As pretty as this car is to me and as a work of art it is, I want to be able to drive it. When I drive that car, first of all, it takes me back to my youth, which is where I first fell in love with it. It's something that I was never meant to drive, I thought. It's something I only could admire from far away, and here I am now driving my dream car. It's phenomenal. You know, every little bump you feel, every sensation is just, oh my gosh, I'm driving a Porsche 928. And it's incredible. So my car is a 1991 Porsche 928 S4. Probably the most interesting feature of it, the thing that people notice the most, are the headlights. They roll out where most cars of the time period, they would pop up, and that was sort of a requirement of the time. But it creates a whole different look, and it really grabs people's attention. And the other thing that people tend to notice is the rear end of the car, because it's very rounded. It has a totally different shape than almost any car out there, and it was really, really revolutionary at the time. And it just creates this look, this really sleek look that you don't see on most cars today, or even before that. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that made that car, in 1977 when it was released to the world at the Geneva Motor Show, it won Car of the Year, but it did because it was just so different. And it looked like a spaceship compared to anything else that had been before. And interestingly enough, because of that, today it probably has aged well in that respect. You know, it's sleek, it's low. It doesn't have the flashy looks of, say, other cars of the time period, like the Lamborghini or the Ferrari Testarossa or something. It definitely was more low-key, but in a way that's really helped it, because it can drive along next to a car today and it almost feels like it's something that people may have purchased brand new. Look at the interior, that's where it even gets more interesting, because once again, for a 30-year-old car, it feels pretty modern. It doesn't have a GPS screen, it doesn't have some of those, but it's got a lot of the features that you would expect to see on a more modern car. So as you drive around, you don't feel deprived in something like that. It feels, you know, the nice leather seats, very, very comfortable. It has the sport seat package, so they're a little more narrow, they fit you, they're a little more form-fitting, and so it really helps when you're driving a little more aggressively or spiritedly. You know, everything about the car is set up to benefit the driver, and it's just an amazingly comfortable car. There's a lot of challenges associated with the upkeep and being a caretaker of especially a 928. It's probably one of the most technically sophisticated cars of its time. They did things in that car that today we take for granted, it's standard, but it was revolutionary at the time. I mean, this car has ABS brakes, and again, this is a 91, but the ones in the late 80s had ABS brakes. It has a rudimentary version of traction control called PSD. It has four-wheel steering. You know, it's got these just aspects to it that, and a lot of interior, a lot of the technical things today that we do with a little module that you can simply replace, they did with miles and miles of wiring. So it's definitely a complex car, which means you need to be very careful on who you have service it and who takes care of it, because a lot of well-intended mechanics that aren't aware of some of the uniqueness of how they designed things and did things, and it can cause problems. And then there's fantastic people around the country that are very supportive and have supply aftermarket parts, and then Porsche is actually pretty good with supplying parts for it, and a lot of knowledge as well. It's a real commitment. It's a car you have to stay on top of the mechanicals, and especially electronics. That's where this car, the engines on these things are bulletproof, but the electronics, because they were so technically complicated and Porsche was trying to do so many things with it. I mean, it has a tire pressure monitoring system on it. Now think about that. Today, tire pressure monitoring is a $5 sensor inside your wheel that they throw away every time you replace your tires and put in a new one. This has this amazingly complex induction pickup system and pressure regulating valves, and two of them in each, as the tire rotates, induces a current that is picked up and then sent to a computer to then tell you whether or not your tire pressure is correct. And this was done in the 1980s. And I mean, but it's very, very complicated. You wouldn't want the average tire place to even think about that because they wouldn't know what to do with it because it's so weird. Those kind of things you really have to be willing to accept, understand, and realize that it's not going to be a simple, cheap, or easy fix when you approach it. But you just decide that you want to do it and you do it. But my biggest thing I try to do is stay on top of any electrical gremlins because of the level of complexity of the wiring. One of the early things I did as soon as I got it, it's got 13 grounding points around the car that are specific, as opposed to just using the chassis. They actually use grounding points. And I went through and I was able to clean 11 of them. 2 of them I just couldn't get to, so for now they're going to have to be what they are. But it still was a challenge just crawling around that thing trying to find them all. My interest in the 928 really came from an experience I had when I was around 12 years old. My father loved 911s and was interested in those, and so occasionally we'd go to the dealership on a lazy Saturday afternoon and just admire, do a little window shopping. And the first time I went in there, I remember seeing the 928. I guess I knew something about it, but it really hadn't gelled yet. And it was neat, and I saw it, and for what I remember, it was locked. You couldn't get in it, so you could just look at it from the outside. And I remember it was not too long after that we went back and the car was unlocked. And the door, and they let me open and they let me get in it. And I just remember it was instant love at first sight, at first sit. It was amazing. I knew at that moment there was something special about this car before I really understood anything about it beyond that. Had no idea it had a V8. Had all the special features that it does and how ahead of its time it was. I just knew I really, really liked this car. And it was one of those feelings that stayed with me through my, from then on out. It was, Darren's into the 928s. My other friend was into a Ferrari, and the other one had the Countach poster on his wall. Cars were such an essential part of what we lived and breathed and what we thought. And everyone knew if you saw a movie when, of course, Risky Businesses, which everybody remembers, but Weird Science, they had a black 928, which is ultimately what I ended up getting. And I remember being at the theater with my friends, and as soon as that car came across the screen, they both looked at me and was like, "Hey, Darren, that's your car." So just neat stuff like that. And I loved it. Of course, life moves on. You get older, you go to school, you graduate, you start doing other things. And it took a mental backseat for me. It wasn't as important at that time. You move on, you're doing other things with your life. And so it was still there, but really, really sort of in the background. And I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years is when it really, really kind of came to the foreground of, hey, you know what? I can actually do this now. A couple of years ago, there was a gentleman here in the local Porsche organization that was looking to sell his. And he had spared no expense in making this just a fantastic car in every respect. And one of the people that knew him also knew me and contacted us and was like, "Hey, Jim's interested in selling his 928. So we went and looked at the car, and I was blown away by it. And I was like, and my wife and I was like, and she's like, "This is the car." And I said, "Yeah, I think you're right." He had spared no expense in making it as good as he possibly could. And starting to negotiate price and sort of talk about some of the details. And I had told my story of how I fell in love with this car when I was 12 years old to the people involved, and they took that information back to him. And basically they said that that's what sold him. He wanted to sell the car to me because he said they said he felt like there was a kindred spirit of somebody else who felt about this car the way he did. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, but I grew up at Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach. Moved there when I was like 3 years old. And yeah, it was pretty typical childhood, I guess, for the time period. I would say, looking back, growing up around Wilmington in that area, fantastic childhood. I didn't really appreciate it until later on. You know, pretty slow way of life, a lot of room, especially as a teenager driving, a lot of room to make mistakes without worrying compared to the traffic we experience now. But it was, you know, it was good. My parents, they got divorced when I was around 6, but it was, they were fantastic, both of them, in helping me, you know, develop and grow, and they worked really well together to do that. Well, I think about, you know, my parents were very supportive of me in terms of anything I wanted to do. My mom was always, you know, you can absolutely be anything you want to be. I never had anybody telling me that I had to be less than. And, you know, and my dreams were my dreams. And they would do whatever they could to help me. As a matter of fact, that's my son's dreams. I think about him today and realize that his dreams are very, very different than mine. But because of the support I was given, the example I was given, I think I want to help him be as successful as he can with his dreams, even though they're radically different than what I found interesting. And that's awesome. It's teaching me, and I'm learning new things because of him. I have my wife, Tracy, and I have my son, Liam. So Tracy is my business partner, but she's also my wife, and she's my car enthusiast partner. My wife is probably my biggest cheerleader when it comes to this. She's a car girl, self-described, loves Porsches, and has spent probably more time the last few years looking for this car for me than I have. As a matter of fact, even though somebody contacted us about it, she found it herself independently, and then it sort of all happened at the same time. And, you know, and the fact that she was instrumental in making this happen, making me get over my concern, and my fears, and all of the things that are natural when you're getting ready to spend a significant amount of money on something that really isn't necessary. And she just made all of that go away. One fun fact, or one thing she said to me, because this car was very special because of how Jim took care of the car and everything that was done to it, and it was such a time capsule of what a 928 was in that period, that she was like, "Are you sure you want to buy this one?" And I turned to her, I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you're not just buying a car, you're buying a responsibility." And I'll never forget that, because I've felt that ever since I own it, or ever since we bought it, that, you know, I'm a caretaker of this car as less than an owner. I guess if you're wondering, if you're out there and you're a kid watching this, or somebody who goes, you know, you've got your own dream and you're thinking, you know, mine will never happen. I've learned, if nothing else, keeping on can make that happen. I didn't expect this dream to happen, but at the same time, I never gave up on it either. And I think that's the aspect of it. You just don't give up. People that are successful at anything in life, be it realizing a dream, a business, or a relationship, or whatever, they just don't quit. You know, you lose when you quit, but if you keep doing it and you hold it, and, you know, I guess at the end of the day, if it really, really matters to you, you'll find a way. But don't worry if it doesn't happen right away. I mean, it took me 38 years to realize my dream. And you know, obviously over 38 years, it's easy to believe it'll never happen. And if it took 38 more before it happened, that's okay too. I'm Darren Smith from Wake Forest, North Carolina. I'm a real person with a real story with a real ride.